1,000 years ago when I worked in the Senate, I was in a few White House negotiations. This sounds like the shortest one ever. This sounds like 2 questions, no answers, goodbye.
Yeah, first of all, Kevin McCarthy has no idea what he's asking for, right? So it's hard to have a negotiation when one side has no position. We guess that what they may want is big cuts to Medicare benefits or Social Security. Maybe they want a 30% national sales tax, but it's hard to have a negotiation when one side doesn't have an ask. It's also hard to have a negotiation when this caucus is just so dysfunctional, right? They can't pick a leader. There's really no sense that they could ever enter into this kind of complex negotiation over the sovereignty of American debt. My advice to President Biden is don't negotiate, right? Tell these guys that it is your job as a member of Congress to pay America's bills. These aren't Democratic bills. They're not Republican bills. This is the spending that Democrats and Republicans have voted for. And when you get sworn into Congress, it is just your job to pay those bills. You don't get a choice about that. You don't get to negotiate over it. You want to light the economy on fire. You get nothing for that. We'll see if the White House is going to ultimately sit down at the negotiating table. I would argue to take a hard line.
You're going to have to get 60 votes in the Senate for this. So it's not as if the Senate is the easy lift and the House is the difficult lift. They're both difficult.
Yeah, they're both difficult, but you have got more Republicans in the Senate that see the harm of playing chicken with American credit, especially at a moment when things are starting to go pretty well for the American economy, right? Obviously, we've had very low unemployment. You're starting to see inflation come down. This is just not the moment to play these games. So I think it's an easier time to get the votes in the Senate. I think there's at least 10 Republicans that are not interested in playing this game of chicken.
Yeah, I mean, there's news indicating that there's about 24 Republican senators who are saying we want what the House wants, which is we don't know what that is. But what that means is half of the Republicans, at least, in the Senate are not with the House. They're not publicly saying, I am handcuffed to Kevin McCarthy. So there's the 10 or more could be available.
So you've had this sort of interesting phenomenon in the United States Senate where a group of Republicans who used to kind of sit on the sidelines have frankly moved towards the Democrats, have started to be more interested in compromise as a reaction to the direction that the Kevin McCarthy Republicans have taken. And so you've seen all this compromise come out of the United States Senate. You're seeing some of those Republicans in the Senate talk more reasonably about the debt ceiling, in part because there's a small group of them that don't want this party to become a daily dumpster fire, as it has been since the beginning of this year.
I want to ask you about an article you've written about alienated white men and what a danger they can represent. There's a video of the guy who attacked Nancy Pelosi's husband, which I think we have ready, which I think is relevant to this. Can we take a look at that?
Now that you all have seen the body cam footage, I have an important message for everyone in America. You're welcome.
So that's the alienated white man saying to everyone in America, you're welcome for my attack with a hammer on Nancy Pelosi's husband, which we've all now, or those of us who could look at it, have seen on video. That's the extreme case of the kind of person you're not giving up on and you're trying to reach.
Yeah, what you've seen in America today, right, is this crisis of aloneness and loneliness. People who are just unmoored from any kind of connection to their community. And when people start to feel lonely and alone, there's 2 things that happen. One, they get really sad and they get really unhealthy. And that's why you're seeing a spike in suicides, especially amongst white men. But the other thing is that you feel angry, right? You have a sense of rage at, why is everybody else seem to be doing well and I feel so terrible about myself? And that sort of pushes people in really dangerous directions. They're trying to find connection. They're trying to find community, and they often find it in dangerous places. So what I'm arguing is that we need to reach out to all of these people, many in rural areas, many of them white men, who feel alone, who feel unmoored, and try to rebuild the health of local communities, have a purposeful strategy of rebuilding church health and local civic group health and, bringing local industry back to these small towns, give people a sort of sense of geographic mooring, give them places that they can sort of attach themselves to as second homes in their community. I think that's one of the things that is missing in this country, just a place for people to find community. It's very hard to find today.
Is this an outgrowth and an extension of the thinking and introspection that began for you with that horrible mass murder at Sandy Hook Elementary School in your state?
So it's true that a lot of these young men who perpetrate these horrific crimes of mass murder are feeling very alone in the world, right? Feeling like they have no connection. I don't want to create the impression, right, that a feeling of loneliness automatically leads to an episode of violence. But it is true that there are more people today that feel a sense of social isolation than ever before. And online existence is not doing it, right? People, I think, believe that they are checking the box of connection when they exist online, but we're finding that that just isn't as healthy as in-person experiences, picking up the phone and talking to somebody. And so we've got to build policies that create places where people can have real connection again, instead of this sort of fake connection that is happening online predominantly.